Hello, Pre-Algebra B. I hope you all are doing well. I'm sorry I haven't posted a video in a couple days. Our basement flooded, so I have been dealing with that, but I'm back ready to post videos for you. So this video is going to be on the order of operation notes. I have picked number 2 in the guided notes to look at. The example is filled in the notes we upload, so you should already have it, but I think it helps to kind of talk through this problem. So in this problem, we've got Denise wants to buy IU shirts and mugs for each of her 3 family members. Each shirt costs $14 and each mug costs $9.50. She pays with a $100 bill. How much change should she get? And the question actually asks for 2 things. One, it asks for an equation that represents this. An equation is going to show like all the different steps you would have to do to get the answer. So like, are you adding these numbers? Are you multiplying these numbers? What are you doing with these? And then it asks for the answer. So just the answer to the question, how much change should she get? I think the best place to start, at least for a lot of students in the past, have been just figure out what steps you would need to do to get this answer. Don't worry about like putting it all into an equation at first. Just think through what would you need to do to answer this question. Well, if you go into a store and you buy stuff like Denise is doing, and you want to know how much change you should get, well, the first thing you need to figure out is how much money you're spending. So in this problem, think through, what is she spending money on? Well, she's spending $14 on each shirt she buys. And she's also spending $9.50 on each mug. So we know the cost of the things. It's saying each shirt costs $14. Well, how many is she buying? She's buying IU shirts and mugs for each of her 3 family members. So that means she's buying 3 shirts and she's buying 3 mugs. Think through just that part there. What would we need to do to figure out how much money she's spending there? Well, to figure out how much money she's spending on shirts, if shirts cost $14 and she's buying 3 of them, you could always do $14 for the first shirt, $14 for the second shirt, $14 for the third shirt, or we can just do 14 times 3, which you of course would do the math off to the side. 14 times 3 gives you 42. I'm just going to pause there for a second and ask, what does 42 represent? I know it's 14 times 3, but what did we just find there? Well, we found that's the total amount of money she's spending on shirts. So I'm just going to write total shirt money. She's also buying mugs. What would we have to do to find out how much money she's spending on the mugs? Well, same idea. She's spending $9.50 on each mug, and she's also buying 3 mugs. So we would want to do $9.50 times 3. Again, you would want to do your multiplication. 15, 27, and we get $28.50. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was cut off for you. So we get $28.50. Again, if I asked you what that represents, well, that represents the total mug, the total amount of money she's spending on mugs. So we found this is how much money she's spending on the shirts. This is how much money she's spending on mugs. Remember, we're trying to answer the question how much change she should get. In order to figure out how much change she should get, we need to know how much total money she's spending. What should our next step be? Well, to find how much total money she's spending, we need to find the total of these 2 things. When I say the word total, that means we would want to add. We would want to add the 42 and the 28.50. When you go to do that, when you're adding a number that, we'll dip you down a little bit. Hello. When you're adding a number that doesn't have a decimal with a number that does, you need to make that one look like a decimal. So we could say 42. It's really like $42.00 plus 28.50. And we get $7.50. Now pause again, ask yourself, what did we just find? Well, we were adding these two things to find, this is the total money spent. Now, we still haven't answered the question. We're trying to find how much change she should get, so there's one last step. If this is the money she's spending, in order to find how much change she gets, well, you're taking the money you're spending away from the money you have. How much money did she have? Well, if we read it again, you can see it all to read again. It tells us in the last sentence, if she pays with a $100 bill. So our last step, in order to figure out how much change she gets back, what are we going to need to do? We're going to need to subtract. Now, the order when you write these numbers is really important. We need to subtract, start with what you have, and then subtract, take away what you're spending. So when I go to write my subtraction, I want the 100 minus $70.50. It needs to be in that order. You can't flip it around, because if you had it the other way, it would end up giving you a negative, and you can't get negative change back. So we get 100 minus $70.50, which would end up being $29.50. That right there is how much change she gets back. Now, we have done one part of this question. We figured out the answer to the question, which was she gets $29.50 back. But we still haven't represented all of this in an equation. I've written down a lot of the math we did, but we want one single equation with all of our work to represent this problem. The good thing is we've got all the steps we took. So one of the things when we go to write our equation, it's going to have a bunch of different operations in it, but you can use these steps to help you write it. So we, at the beginning, if I write down here, I'm going to erase the question. Hold on. Don't I miss my big whiteboard in my classroom? Okay. So my first thing we did was we had to do 14 times 3. And another thing we had to do was is the 950 times 3. Now, after we got those two amounts, what we ended up doing is adding them together. So I'm going to go ahead and say 14 times 3 plus 950 times 3. Right here, this equation represents something. Do you know what this right here represents? Well, if you add this multiplication problem and this multiplication problem, when we add those together, that represents the total amount of money spent. So I could give you a very similar question to this, but just ask, write an equation to represent how much money she spent. This would be it. There's one last step with this one, though, and that was the change we had to find. So after we found out all this money she spent, we ended up subtracting. Now, what a lot of students want to do is, because it was the last step, they like to write the minus 100 at the end, because it was what we did at the end. That's the last step we did, was we subtracted 100. But there's a problem with that. Remember earlier when we were writing this subtraction problem, how I said it's really important when you write it that you're starting with the larger number, you're starting with the money you have, and you're taking out the money you spend? This is written backwards. This is the money we're spending, and you're taking 100 away from it. So we actually need that minus 100 to go in the front. Now, there's one last step that you're going to want to do, and that's to make sure, if I had given you this problem and you went to solve it, you would end up doing the math in the same order. And to help you decide that goes back to PEMDAS, order of operations, what this whole lesson is on. So off to the side, I'm just going to write our PEMDAS. And I write it like this because there's that rule about left to right if you've got both of these. But if I had given you this problem and we wanted to solve it using order of operations, it would say start with P, which is parentheses. We don't have that. Next, go to exponents. Well, we don't have that. Next, do your multiplication and division. We have that. We've got multiplication here and multiplication here. So according to order of operations, we would want to start by doing both these multiplications. we would want to do 14 times 3, which we did that, it's 42. And we would want to do our 950 times 3, which we did that. That is 2850. After your multiplication, you want to do your addition and subtraction, which we have that. We've got addition and subtraction. This again is my reminder of there's that rule about if you have both, you go left to right. It's not always addition before subtraction, like PEMDAS says. You've got both, like we do. We want to go left to right. So looking at the problem we have, if we were to do that, our next step would be 100 minus 42, which would give us an answer. And then we would add in 2850. Now I'm not writing anything down because that's not what we wanted to do. Our next thing we wanted to do, remember from before, is we would want to add these numbers. We want to add these two things together. But the problem is, the way we've written this, it doesn't tell us to do that. The way we've written it, it says the next thing to do is subtract. The reason I've picked this problem to look at in this video is because a lot of students miss the part we're missing here. And that part has to do with parentheses. When you are writing an expression like this and you want to show, I want to do it out of order. I really want to do this addition next, right here, instead of the subtraction. The way you show that is by using parentheses. Parentheses are amazing at saying, hey, do this first. I want you to not shake the computer. Do this part first, though. So going back to our original problem, what we wanted to do is find our total amount of money spent, which we said is represented by this here. If we had had parentheses around it, then our next step would be adding here, which would then say 42 plus our 2850, like we had done before, gives us our $70.50, and then our last step could be subtraction. So I've gone through all of this to show you. Those parentheses can be really easy to forget, which is why I suggest going through it and thinking about it in this order. Think through first what you would want to do to answer the question. You can go ahead and answer the question because lots of times I'm asking you for this number. But then use these steps you've written to help you write an expression that tells you to do it in the same order as your steps. So, going back to the second part of the question, write an expression to represent it. This would be our answer. It's saying 100 is the money you're starting with, and we're subtracting everything you're spending. Those parentheses there are to show this is the total amount of money you're spending. This is the money you have minus all we spent. So those parentheses there are really important. Keep this part about parentheses in mind when you look at some of the future problems. You go to do the homework problems, because I think they're probably the easiest thing that students make mistakes with, is they just forget that you need parentheses to kind of show that you want to do it in a specific order. Hopefully this helped you with these notes. Don't forget, if you have any questions on these, I know e-learning can be very difficult, and I know there's a lot of stuff on our minds right now in addition to just math. So if you have questions, please reach out. This is a difficult period right now, but we all can get through it, and I'll be here to help in any way I can to get you through it. So don't forget to reach out. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon.